you are referencing a more overarching discipline known as epistemology. Okay, now the relationship is, what is the relationship? What is the ethical relationship between accountability and knowledge, or accountability and, to be more technical, epistemology? So I'll say that again. This would be a good sort of review question, right? What is the ethical relationship between accountability and epistemology? Very, very technical question. Not really too difficult. It sounds complicated, but it's a rather simple question. And what I always do when I teach class is I say the following, right? Imagine it's the first day of class, and you come into my classroom, and you know, this is college environment. You stopped at the vending machine, and you got a Coke, right? So you get a Coke, you come into class, you crack the Coke open, Dr. Campbell's lecturing, you're drinking the Coke, and I come up to you and I was like, I thought you knew that this is the first day of class. You've never met me yet. And I say, I thought you knew that there's no drinking in my class, right? I can't believe that you would be so disrespectful as to bring a can of Coke and drink Coke in the class. Do you see anyone else drinking Coke in the class? You're the only person. And then I start to berate the student, right? This, you can imagine, this is evil, Dr. Campbell, right? So the student is like, holy crap, like, how are you going to chew me out the first day of class? I don't know that this is a policy. I don't know. Right? I don't know that this is a policy. You can't hold me accountable, the student is thinking. You can't hold me accountable for a violation. Right? I'll say this again. You can't hold me accountable. This is ghetto philosophy. Right? You can't hold me accountable for a violation where I don't have access to that knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of conduct, right? And I think I erased it, but knowledge of human conduct, right? You can't hold me accountable for a violation if I don't have knowledge of proper conduct. Now we're getting a little more technical. If you understand that, then you recognize that with respect to accountability then, right, and actually I'll leave it up here, with respect to accountability, right, the researcher, right, the researcher must have knowledge, right? If the researcher has knowledge of, and I don't want to get too technical, yeah, I'm not going to get too technical, but this is a conditional claim, right? If the researcher has knowledge of proper conduct, the conduct that governs this particular type of research, via IRB, via committee members, via the canon, via lit review, right? Insofar as you're conducting phenomenological research, here is what is appropriate. Here's an appropriate sample size. Here are appropriate questions. Here's what's not appropriate, right? So insofar as we can make the claim, the conditional claim, if a researcher has knowledge of proper conduct, then it has to be the case, right? Then it has to be the case that the researcher conducts C-O-N-D-U-C, right? If the researcher has knowledge of proper conduct, then it's the case that the conduct of the researcher has to conform to that knowledge, right? If it's said, if the rule is to do X, and the researcher knows the rule, then the researcher's conduct has to be X. If the researcher knows the rule X, and the researcher does not do X, then I can hold the accountable. My punishment is justified insofar as the researcher knew the rule, proper conduct is this, and you did not follow the rule. Therefore, some external source, the federal government, IRB, whoever, is legitimized in punishing the researcher for not conducting him or herself ethically. So, for example, during the, and I don't know this for fact and all the specifics, but during the Bush era, not for better or worse, this is not an ethical claim, this is just a fact. During the Bush era, stem cell research was banned, right? So scientists, having the knowledge and the resources who could otherwise conduct stem cell research because there's access to the resources and they have the knowledge, recognize that the rule was, and we'll switch to the rule this time, the rule is you cannot do stem cell research. So those scientists who did not do stem cell research conformed to the rules. I'm not saying that there was, but those scientists, hypothetically speaking, that refused to obey the rule that you cannot conduct research using stem cells, and did do that, well, you are now going to be held accountable, right? So if you understand that now I'm going to get a little bit more complicated, because this is very important with respect to ethical considerations researchers have to incorporate into their research process. Your punishment, right? Your violation of rules, I'll say this slowly, your violation or your punishment for failing to accord with rules will be legitimized if you have knowledge of proper conduct, right? So that punishment is legitimized by knowledge of proper conduct. I'll say that again. Punishment is legitimized by knowledge of proper conduct. So if I decide to punish you because you conducted stem cell research and you were told that you cannot, I, the external third party, am legitimized, justified in punishing you because you knew you should not have done X, right? But you chose to do it anyway, and ignorance is not bliss. Therefore, you can't claim ignorance because you are a researcher in this particular field. You should know what the rules are. You failed to accord to those rules, and now I'm going to punish you. I, as obviously the party that has power to implement punishment, am legitimized in punishing you because you had knowledge. So the important point is a recognition that insofar as we talk about qualitative methods research, it is impossible to talk about the notion of accountability, right, researcher accountability, without a recognition that there has to be an epistemological relationship between the researcher and the rules that codify conduct, right? There has to be an epistemological relationship between the researcher and the rules that codify conduct. So we ended very, very technical. That last bit I just said was sort of super heady, but hopefully you have a recognition based on sort of the progressive development of the narrative, right? And it's a very simple thing. Just one more time, just because the last bit was super technical. It's very simple. If you know that you're not supposed to bring drinks to my class because it's the third week of school, and you walk into the classroom after repeatedly being told not to bring drinks into the classroom, and you bring drinks into the classroom, and I decide to dock your grade, what are you going to do? You can't do anything, right? Because I'm in the position of power, I make the rules. You either follow the rules or you suffer the consequences of not abiding by my rules. If you don't know and you receive this barrage of insults, right, or I threaten your grade, and you don't have knowledge, then I'm not justified in the punishment, right? So with respect to the researcher needs to make sure at all times that the researcher is up to date on whatever the regulations are that govern the conduct of the researcher. The fact that you're not up to date on your regulations, on the regulations of your university, of your community, of your nation, your government, whatever, is no excuse for failing to act in an appropriate manner. You are charged with the responsibility of knowing what the latest regulations are that govern the type of research that you do, whatever it might be. Okay, so I think that should be very, very, very clear, and hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so the next bit then that I want to discuss is ethical decisions in research process. Okay, so ethical decisions and the research process. Okay, so here's a quote from the book. Ethical decisions arise throughout the entire research process, right? Ethical decisions are, this idea of moral deliberation is sort of one of the first aspects of us conceptualizing our research. Doesn't mean in any sense that the only time we think ethically as qualitative methods researchers is at the beginning of our research. That's ridiculous, right? The idea is, yes, I begin my research, hey, I want to do sampling among the population of Holocaust survivors. Okay, let me make sure that I'm sensitive to their needs, sensitive to their times. Okay, I put that into consideration. I start doing my field work. I do my field work, hey, I need to reassess some things. I start to actual process of interview. Hey, I need to reassess, right? And on and on. So that ethical decisions happen throughout the entirety of the research. There's no need